"Can you hear me, Rose? Just give me a sign." Victor's voice barely broke the hum of machines inside the ICU room. His hand hovered above the monitor, eyes glued to the subtle rhythm of her heart rate. It was 11:45 p.m., and the halls of Weston Medical Center were unusually quiet. Outside the tall hospital windows, Manhattan's skyline pulsed with city lights. Inside, the only light came from the dim glow of vitals, monitors, and a flickering fluorescent above the bed. Rose Langford, 28, lay still beneath crisp white sheet-your face, pale but stunning, framed by a cascade of auburn hair. She had been comatose for 91 days, ever since her Mercedes spiraled off the FDR Drive and slammed into the guardrail. Rumors in the hospital floated like whispersome, said she'd been drinking, others that she was trying to escape someone. But Victor didn't care about the tabloids. What mattered now was the flicker. He saw just a twitch of her eyelid as he whispered to her. "You moved," he murmured, leaning closer. "Rose, if you can hear me, I'm right here." Victor Reynolds had seen plenty in his short years as a doctor. Trauma, recovery, loss. But this was something else. He had worked the overnight rotation at Weston's VIP care for almost a year. Most nights were uneventful. The rich rarely woke up in the middle of the night unless the stock market tanked or someone spiked their green juice with real sugar. But tonight, something had changed. As he gently lifted her wrist to check her pulse manually, the warmth of her skin startled him. It felt warmer than usual. The monitor beeped, softly regular, but slightly faster than earlier in the evening. His brow furrowed. He reviewed the log. Heart rate at 74 BPM an hour ago, now at 82. Nothing drastic, but in medicine, sometimes the smallest changes whispered the loudest truths. He looked again at Rose's face. There was no further movement. Still, the twitch had happened. He wasn't imagining things. He scribbled a quick note on her chart. Observed subtle eyelid twitch in response to verbal stimulus. Slight increase in HR. Recommend further observation. As he placed the chart back, the door creaked open. "Doctor." Aldridge stepped in, chief attending, blazer over scrubs, and a permanent look of someone who had forgotten how to smile. "Still chasing ghosts, Reynolds?" Aldridge asked dryly. Victor straightened. "Sir, I believe I observed a voluntary muscle movement. Left eyelid. Small, but intentional." Aldridge chuckled, flipping through the chart with a lazy finger. "You think a twitch means she's coming back? Maybe her brain's playing tricks. These things happen. You're wasting your time." "And?" Victor hesitated. "But her heart rate." "Son," Aldridge cut in, his voice cool and condescending, "when you've seen as many dying hearts as I have, you'll know they dance all the time. Doesn't mean anything." He handed the chart back, dismissive. "Don't go writing fantasy novels in medical records. You want to stay on the VIP track? Learn to watch, not imagine." The door closed with a soft thud. Victor stood still, staring at the space Aldridge had just occupied. He felt the familiar throb of injustice, quiet but fierce. Not the first time someone assumed his instincts were just emotional noise. Being a young black man in medicine had meant swallowing 100 moments like this. But tonight it pressed harder on his chest. He turned back to Rose. "They won't listen, Rose, but I saw you." Her face, though pale and still, seemed softer now. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her. A long breath escaped him. "Did you ever think about how messed up it is that your life could depend on whether someone believes in a twitch?" He leaned in again, voice low, intimate. "I believe you're still here. And if you are, just hold on. I'll find a way." Victor reached into his coat and pulled out his personal stethoscope, a gift from his grandmother, who used to say, "Listen close, baby. Life always tells you what it wants." He placed it gently on Rose's chest. Her heartbeat, slow but steady, played in his ears like a distant drum. He closed his eyes. For a moment, everything else vanished, the pressure of protocols, the judgmental glances, the hospital politics. There was only that sound. Then something shifted. A beep spiked slightly. Victor opened his eyes. Her lips ever so slightly moved. He froze. Could it be? He waited. Nothing else. No repeat. But the brief flutter had happened. He stood, grabbed his tablet, and began typing a personal log. He wasn't going to file another report just yet, not until he had more evidence. "I'll come back later," he whispered. "And next time I'll be ready." As he turned to leave, he cast one last glance back. The room hummed with a silence that felt strangely alive. Her monitors blinked steadily. Her chest rose and fell. In that moment, Victor didn't feel like just a doctor. He felt like a guardian of something sacred, an unseen flame, fighting not to go out. And even though no one else had seen what he saw, he knew deep in his bones, Rose Langford was not gone. Not yet. And he wasn't going to let them bury her before she had the chance to fight. If you believe every soul deserves a second chance, like this video and comment, "I stand for truth." Because sometimes, a whisper in the dark is louder than any shout. And don't forget to subscribe to support Victor. The next morning, Victor sat stiffly outside the office of Dr. Charles Aldridge. His palms were damp, his foot tapped rhythmically against the polished floor, and every few minutes he glanced at the clock above the receptionist's desk, which seemed to tick just a little too loud for comfort. At exactly 7:30 a.m., the double oak doors creaked open, and Aldridge's assistant, Miss Green, motioned with a clipped nod. "He's ready for you now." Victor stood, tugged at the edge of his lab coat, and entered. "Doctor." Aldridge sat behind his desk like a judge behind the bench stern, unmoving, unimpressed. The blinds were half drawn, casting narrow bars of morning light across his desk and face, giving the whole room a vaguely prison-like aura. "Dr. Reynolds," he began, not offering a seat. "I reviewed your notes from last night." Victor cleared his throat. "Yes, sir. I recorded a twitch, and there was a notable change in heart rate. I believe," Aldridge raised a hand, "what you believe is not clinical evidence. This is Weston Medical, not a high school science fair. You're here because we expect discipline, not wishful thinking." Victor felt heat rise in his neck, but he kept his tone even. "I understand that, sir. But in cases of prolonged coma, subtle signs are enough." Aldridge finally gestured toward the chair in front of him. Victor sat down slowly. Aldridge leaned forward. "Do you know who Rose Langford is?" Victor nodded. "Yes, sir. Heiress to Langford Holdings. Her father built the company from the ground up. She was in a car accident 3 months ago." "Correct," Aldridge said. "And her family, specifically her legal guardians, have made it very clear. They want comfort care only, no aggressive intervention, no false hope." Victor felt a knot twist in his stomach. But she responded, "Twice now. I'm not suggesting resuscitation or invasive procedures, just extended monitoring and observation. If there's a chance she's regaining consciousness." "It's not your call," Aldridge cut in, his voice low and sharp. "Your job is to follow orders, not chase ghosts." He opened a folder on his desk and slid a paper across to Victor. "Effective immediately. You are relieved of ICU rotation. You'll report to the General Diagnostics Ward starting tomorrow." Victor stared at the paper, jaw clenched. It wasn't just a reassignment. It was a message, a warning. Keep your head down. Stay in your place. Outside the office, the hallway buzzed with the early hum of hospital life residents in scrubs, nurses comparing charts, the clatter of carts wheeling breakfast trays. But everything sounded far away to Victor. He walked to the locker room in a daze, changed clothes, and sat on the bench staring at the floor, thoughts tumbling. Was he wrong? Was it really just a twitch? Maybe he had imagined it wanted to see something so badly he'd conjured it. But then he remembered the tear. He hadn't imagined that. He couldn't have. After his shift ended, he didn't go home. Instead, he took the subway uptown to West Harlem, to a red brick assisted living facility tucked between a soul food restaurant and a dusty old bookstore. On the 3rd floor, in room 312, Dr. Alice Monroe was drinking her afternoon tea while listening to Ella Fitzgerald on an old record player. "Victor," she said warmly as he stepped in, "you look like someone just tried to erase you." He smiled weakly. "Close." He sat beside her and explained everything: the twitch, the heart rate, the tear, Aldridge's reaction, the reassignment. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "They want her to die," Victor said quietly, the words tasting bitter as they left his mouth. "Not in the literal sense, maybe, but her death benefits them, and I'm just inconvenient." Alice placed her cup down gently. "You remember what I told you when you started med school?" Victor nodded. "Medicine is politics in a white coat." "Exactly," she said. "And when the politics are stacked against you, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is not look away." She leaned closer. "Did you look away, Victor?" He shook his head. "Then you're still a doctor." He left with a new resolve burning in his chest. The next evening, Though removed from the official ICU shift, Victor returned to Rose's room. He had arranged to cover for another resident during break. Her room was dim again, silent, except for the monitors. He brought with him a small portable speaker and placed it gently on the bedside table. "Claire de Lune," he whispered, and pressed play. The gentle piano notes filled the room. Victor sat and watched her face. The soft rise and fall of her breath, the stillness of her hands, then barely perceptibly a twitch in the corner of her mouth. He froze. A second twitch, this time in her finger. The monitor showed another slight elevation in heart rate. He fumbled for his phone, recording discreetly. "Rose," he whispered. "If you're here, I'm still listening." He stayed with her for 20 minutes, nothing further. But the footage was saved, time-stamped, silent proof that something was happening. Back in the residence lounge, he reviewed the footage again and again. It wasn't dramatic, it wouldn't win over Aldridge, but someone else might listen. Someone not entangled in family politics. That night, he emailed Dr. Patricia Lewis, a member of the state's medical ethics board, someone he had met briefly during a conference on patient rights. The email was short, factual, professional. Subject: potential signs of consciousness in patient Rose Langford. Attached: due video files, heart rate data, observation logs. Message: I believe this patient is showing non-verbal signs of awareness. Official protocols are being ignored or suppressed. I'm requesting a private consultation and advice on the appropriate ethical response. He hesitated before hitting send, then clicked. The silence had spoken. Now it was time to let someone else hear it. The following afternoon, Victor sat in a corner booth of the crowded Lexington deli, a cup of lukewarm coffee in front of him, and the video footage of Rose looping silently on his tablet screen. He watched her eyelid twitch, the slight movement of her finger, the gentle spike in heart rate. It wasn't just hope anymore, it was data. Still, it wasn't the kind of data that a hospital like Weston, bound by power and legacy, would welcome, especially not when a Langford stood to lose millions by simply staying alive. The chime above the deli door rang softly. Victor glanced up and saw her. Dr. Patricia Lewis walked in wearing a navy pea coat, her silver-streaked hair tucked beneath a modest wool hat. She carried herself like someone who had never needed to raise her voice to be heard. She spotted Victor immediately and made her way over. "Dr. Reynolds," she greeted, sliding into the booth. "You've caused quite the ripple." Victor gave a tight smile. "I haven't even started." Patricia pulled off her gloves, laying them on the table. "I watched the video, twice. That's not a reflex. I've seen comatose patients for 30 years, and what you captured, it's awareness." Victor felt a knot unwind in his chest. "Thank you," he said, exhaling. "But if you agree, why hasn't anyone else responded the same way?" Patricia sighed. "Because people don't like complicated problems, especially when they involve money, especially when they involve race. A young black doctor pushing back against an elite white family's end-of-life decisions, that's not just complicated, that's dangerous." Victor leaned forward. "But it's also the truth," she nodded. "Which is why I'm here, but truth alone doesn't change things. It has to be seen, heard, repeated until people can't ignore it." She took a sip of his coffee without asking. "You need more than video clips. You need witnesses, patterns, data logs, and ideally, someone from the inside willing to corroborate what you're seeing." Victor's mind flicked to Nurse Camille, one of the few staffers who'd treated Rose with genuine care. "I might have someone," he said. Patricia tapped the table. "Then move fast, because I'll be honest, Victorth Langfords don't want this girl waking up, and if they sense a threat to their timeline, they'll push for expedited measures." Victor nodded, the weight of it all settling deeper in his chest. As she prepared to leave, Patricia paused. "I remember your name, you know, from a paper you co-authored at Columbia Med on unconscious responsiveness. You argued that certain patients might experience and retain audio stimulus even in deep comas. The board dismissed it, but I didn't. And now, here you are." Victor blinked, surprised. "I thought that paper was buried." "No," she said, smiling faintly. "It was just waiting for the right patient." She left him with that, a glimmer of affirmation that felt like a lit candle in a room full of shadows. Later that night, Victor returned to the hospital under the pretense of finishing paperwork. He made his way to the nurse's station near ICU and found Camille updating files. She looked up, surprised. "Back again? I thought they kicked you off this floor." Victor kept his voice low. "I need your help, Camille. Just a few minutes of your time." She glanced around, then gestured for him to follow her into the supply room. Inside, surrounded by shelves of gauze and IV fluid, he told her everything. The signs from Rose, the footage, the reassignment, Patricia Lewis. Camille's expression shifted from cautious to concerned. "I've seen her eyes flutter before," she whispered, "but I didn't say anything. Thought it was just wishful thinking." "It's not," Victor said. "She's trying to wake up." Camille's brow furrowed. "If that's true, then her family's trying to shut her down before she gets the chance." Victor nodded. "Will you testify to what you saw?" She hesitated. "You know what this place is like. If I speak up, I'll be reassigned or worse." He met her eyes. "I can't promise you safety, but I can promise you truth, and that no one else is going to stand up for Rose unless we do." After a moment, she nodded. "Okay, but we have to be smart." Together, they began compiling a hidden log of every anomaly movement, heart rate fluctuation, oxygen saturation shifts. Camille would update from inside. Victor would organize it outside, and Patricia would guide them both. They called it the candle file, because in a system built to extinguish lives for convenience, this was their small, stubborn flame of defiance. As days passed, Victor's routine became a delicate balancing act. He worked his general ward rotation by day, slipped back into ICU shadows by night. Each evening, he sat by Rose's bedside, sometimes reading poetry aloud, sometimes simply speaking about his day. He told her about the deli on 87th that served over-salted matzo ball soup, about a young boy in pediatrics who insisted on being called Captain America, and about his grandmother, who used to light a candle each night and say, "Even the darkest rooms fear a little fire." Every now and then, he caught another flicker, a shift in her lips, a finger curl, a flutter of eyelash, and every time, he recorded, time-stamped, logged it. On the 7th day, Camille slipped him a printed sheet. "You should see this," she whispered. It was an internal memo sent to the Langford legal team. "Authorization pending. Termination of life support. Patient, Rose Langford. Date recommended. Friday, 6 p.m. Victor stared at the paper, bile rising in his throat. It was happening. They were going to pull the plug. He looked back at Camille. "We have 3 days." She nodded, grim. 3 days to bring her back or stop them. Victor's jaw tightened. "Then we fight like hell for every hour." That night, he didn't just read poetry. He told Rose the truth. "They want you gone," he said softly, voice cracking. "But I know you're in there, and I won't let them take you. Not without a fight. So if you can hear me, move, blink, cry, do anything. Just meet me halfway." And for the first time since she was admitted, Rose Langford's right index finger twitched twice in succession, 2 deliberate taps on the mattress, like Morse code from a soul clawing its way back. Victor's breath caught in his throat, and for the first time, he allowed himself to whisper, "Welcome back." The candle had not just flickered, it had sparked, and soon, the darkness would have no choice but to see it. By the next morning, Victor's hands trembled not from fatigue, though he hadn't slept, but from the kind of rush only a witness to a miracle can know. 2 taps, 2 clear, precise movements, not a random twitch, not a nerve misfire intent. He had documented it all. The timing, the monitor response, his own whispered prompt, just seconds before it happened. And now, with Camille's logs and Patricia's support, they had a case, bare bones, fragile but a case. Still, 3 days was all they had. He knew the Langfords had influence deeper than medical reports or ethics boards. If they wanted the machines shut down, no flicker of hope would stop them unless the public knew. That morning, Victor returned to the hospital not as a quiet observer but with purpose sharpened like a scalpel. First, he slipped into the resident lounge and scanned the internal network. Using Camille's temporary credentials, he accessed the ICU surveillance backup files. After cross-checking timestamps, he found the precise hour of Rose's 2-finger response. The footage was grainy but clear. Her hand moved. Twice. He extracted the clip and encrypted it on his personal drive. Next up, Patricia. By noon, They met at a discreet co-working space on the Upper West Side. Patricia examined the clip, nodding slowly, her lips pursed. "This is enough," she said, "to make noise. Not legal action yet, but media attention? Absolutely." Victor exhaled. "Are you sure? Going public? It's a risk." She locked eyes with him. "Silence is a verdict, Victor. If we do nothing, they win." And she disappears with a quiet beep and a statement about best medical judgment. "We need pressure," Victor nodded. "So how do we begin?" Patricia pulled out her phone. "I have a contact at the Ledger senior health correspondent. Honest, sharp, and not afraid to rattle cages." That evening, Victor met the reporter in a quiet cafe downtown. Her name was Dana Reiterly, 50s, notebook always in hand, eyes that studied people the way surgeons studied wounds. She listened carefully, interrupting only for clarification. When Victor finished his account and handed her the drive, she sat still for a long moment. "This is going to upset a lot of people," she said finally. "The Langfords have deep roots in this city." Victor's voice was calm. "So do lies, and they're overdue for some pruning." She cracked a slight smile. "All right, Dr. Reynolds, let's make them nervous." She stood. "But be ready. If I run this story, there's no turning back. You're going to be painted as reckless, opportunistic, maybe worse." Victor looked her dead in the eye. "I don't care what they call me, as long as she has a chance." The next morning, the article dropped. Doctor alleges suppressed recovery signs in Langford heiress coma case. It was clear, direct, and devastating. It laid out the sequence of events, the family's push to end care, and Victor's documentation. There were quotes from Patricia, anonymized logs from Camille, and still shots of Rose's hand mid-movement. The piece ended with a question in bold. "If she's still trying to fight for her life, why is everyone trying to pull the plug?" The reaction was instant. Within hours, hospital PR released a statement denying all claims, citing privacy and accusing the whistleblower of misrepresentation. But the public didn't buy it. Social media lit up with outrage. Hashtags trended, number Let Rose Live, number Trust Truth, number Second Chances Matter. Donations poured in. News anchors picked it up. Overnight, Victor Reynolds was no longer invisible. He was a spark, and the fire had caught. At the hospital, Aldridge was livid. He summoned Victor within the hour. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked, slamming the printed article onto the table. "You've compromised this institution's integrity." Victor stayed seated, calm. "I upheld my oath. That's more than I can say for you." Aldridge's face reddened. "You're done here. Effective immediately, you're on unpaid leave pending investigation." Victor nodded, unsurprised. "I expected that. But just so you know, Rose moved again this morning. 3 times. And I have it on video." He stood. "You can silence me, but the world's already watching." Outside, hospital security escorted him off the premises. Cameras were waiting. Dana Wright had arrived early. As flashes sparked and microphones crowded in, Victor stood tall. They said she wasn't responding. They were wrong. They said she couldn't hear. She did. And they wanted to shut her off before anyone knew. But now, you all know. That night, Victor didn't sleep. He watched the feeds, the retweets, the reactions. A retired trauma nurse in Chicago wrote, "We saw this too often when patients without power were declared gone too early." A man from Alabama shared, "My brother woke up after 103 days. Never stopped believing." It wasn't just about Rose anymore. It was about every silenced voice that might have been more than a whisper. Meanwhile, Camille texted him updates from the inside. Langford lawyers arrived, trying to fast-track authorization again. PR in full spin mode. Ethics board reviewing. Victor typed back, "Hold tight. Help is coming." Then, at 2:14 a.m., his phone buzzed again. It was a call from a restricted number. He answered. A woman's voice, raspy but soft, said just 3 words, "Tell me everything." It was Rose, the voice barely above a whisper, but real, awake, alive. Victor sat frozen, emotions clashing, shock, joy, relief, rage. "Rose, you're awake?" A soft cough. Then, "I remember. Voices, music, you." He swallowed hard. "You're safe. We're going to protect you." But she interrupted, urgency in her voice. "Number. They tried to stop me. I overheard, while they thought I was gone." Victor stood up, heart racing. "What did you hear?" A pause. "Uncle David. He wants control. If I die, he gets full access." Victor nodded grimly. It was worse than he thought. "Then we bring them all down." As he hung up, he stared out the window at the first light of morning. The war was no longer just medical. It was legal. It was moral. And it had a name. Rose Langford had returned. The story was no longer about a coma. It was about a conspiracy. And now, the silence had broken wide open. Victor's hands were still trembling as he sat behind the steering wheel of his aging Honda, parked just 2 blocks from the hospital. The conversation with Rose kept echoing in his head like a ghostly hymn. "Tell me, everything." And then that final revelation, Uncle David, the man who'd been painted in the media as her grieving guardian, quietly maneuvering her demise to gain control of the Langford empire. It wasn't just about disbelief anymore. It was about intent, calculated betrayal. He called Patricia. She answered on the first ring, her voice sharp and alert. "What's happened?" She woke up, he said, breathless. "Rose. We spoke. She remembers. She heard everything." There was a silence, then a barely contained breath. "God Almighty. That changes everything." Victor filled her in on what Rose had said, the whispered confessions she'd caught from the darkness of her coma. If she's right, this wasn't just negligence, it was premeditated. Patricia's voice dropped. "We need to get this recorded, officially, before they try to silence her again." Victor pulled away from the curb, heading toward an address Patricia had texted. A private clinic in Queens, operated discreetly by one of her trusted colleagues, Dr. Eileen Chan, an ally, off the radar. That evening, with Camille's quiet help, Rose was transferred during a brief window when her room had been left momentarily unsupervised officially for equipment servicing. No one noticed, or at least, no one admitted they had. By the time the hospital security footage caught up, the bed was empty and a new patient had been registered elsewhere under a pseudonym. In the safety of the new clinic, Rose rested still weak, her voice fragile, but her mind alert. She clutched Victor's hand as he gently walked her through the hours ahead. A recorder sat nearby, ready. She spoke slowly, methodically, confirming every detail, the overheard plans, the moments when the nurses left the television on or forgot to mute the visitors' conversations. "They thought I was gone," she whispered, eyes wet. "But I was still here. I heard them laugh, heard them say it was easier this way." David said, "The board won't even blink." Patricia, listening in via secure line, broke the silence afterward. This is no longer just a medical story. It's a criminal one." She coordinated with a contact in the district attorney's office, someone who'd once owed her a favor after she testified on a controversial elder abuse case. Within 12 hours, a sealed affidavit was prepared, filed discreetly. The DA's team began pulling Langford family trust records, medical authorizations, and financial transfers. They found something curious. 2 weeks before Rose's scheduled termination, David Langford had funneled $1.2 million into an offshore account. Meanwhile, Victor's name had exploded across national media. He'd been suspended, slandered by Weston's legal team, and targeted online. Some accused him of exploiting a patient for fame. Others said he fabricated the videos. But the growing wave of supporters kept building. Former patients, nurses, families of coma survivors. They remembered Victor's quiet demeanor, his listening ear, the way he never treated anyone like just another chart, in number letters speak, was trending globally. Inside the clinic, Victor continued visiting Rose daily. Their connection grew beyond patient and doctor, something rooted deeper in survival, in shared resistance. One evening, as he adjusted her blanket, she asked, "Why did you believe me, when no one else did?" He looked into her eyes. "Because I've been invisible too." Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "Then maybe we'll be seen together." But the reprieve was short-lived. On the third morning, Dr. Chan burst into the room with a look of panic. "They know she's here," she said. "Someone leaked it. There's a legal injunction. They want her remanded into hospital custody for proper care, claiming her transfer was against medical protocol." Patricia called in. "We have 12 hours before they attempt forceful relocation. I've contacted the DA. They're accelerating, but we need a public confirmation. She has to speak, on record." Live. Victor turned to Rose. Can you do it? She nodded slowly. Yes, if it means ending this. That evening, through a secure streaming channel arranged by Dana Wright's team, Rose Langford spoke to the world. Seated in a modest hospital bed, her hair gently brushed, eyes tired but alive. She recounted everything, her accident, the voices, the betrayal. Her voice cracked but did not break. I was supposed to die quietly, but I heard them, and I refused. The world responded instantly. Celebrities reposted. Journalists demanded answers. Legal authorities moved faster. A warrant was issued for David Langford's arrest. Bank records were subpoenaed. And the Langford board publicly denounced him within 48 hours. But even in victory, the wounds lingered. Victor sat beside Rose days later, watching the news coverage on her tablet. Her hand, once still, now rested warmly over his. What happens now? She asked. He thought a moment. Now, we heal, you recover, and when you're ready, we testify. She nodded. And you? Victor smiled faintly. I keep fighting for the ones who whisper before they speak. Rose turned to him. Then don't whisper anymore. Outside, the winter air pressed against the window pane, but inside, something warmer had begun to grow. Not just justice, not just truth, but the quiet strength of two lives finally heard. And though the darkness had nearly won, the voice it tried to silence had become a beacon. The story of Rose Langford was no longer just hers. It was a rallying cry for dignity, for courage, for the power of never looking away. The media frenzy that followed Rose Langford's broadcast was both a shield and a double-edged sword. In the days that followed her powerful testimony, Victor barely had a moment's rest. Between legal briefings, coordination with the DA's office, and his continued bedside presence, he felt like a man living across 10 different timelines. Every channel was running segments on the Langford heiress conspiracy, digging into decades of Langford family legacy, scrutinizing past medical authorizations, trust fund reallocations, and the unchecked power of hospital boards over vulnerable patients. But while the public fought in hashtags and headlines, Victor and Rose were battling something quieter: exhaustion, trauma, and the fragile process of healing. Inside the clinic, the atmosphere had shifted from urgency to resilience. With David Langford under house arrest pending trial, and the Langford Trust frozen under a court order, Rose was no longer under immediate threat, but Victor knew better than to mistake survival for safety. Patricia called him that afternoon, her voice more grave than usual. "There's pressure from the Weston board," she said. "They want a scapegoat, and you, Victor, are a very convenient candidate." "What are they accusing me of?" he asked. "Unlawful transfer of a patient, unauthorized disclosure of medical data, and now, manipulating a vulnerable patient for media attention." Victor exhaled slowly. "They're trying to discredit her by discrediting me." "Exactly. You're not just her doctor anymore, Victor. You're her credibility." The line went quiet, then Patricia added, "Be careful who you trust next. They're playing a long game." Later that evening, Victor sat by Rose's bedside again. Her energy was returning, though her voice remained soft and raspy. "You look tired," she said, managing a small smile. "You should sleep." "I will. Eventually," he said. "There's a hearing scheduled next week. They want to decide if I'm fit to continue practicing." Rose frowned. "You saved me. They can't possibly." "They can," he interrupted gently. "Not because I did something wrong, but because I did something loud. People like Aldridge don't care about truth. They care about control." She was silent for a long time, then reached for his hand. "If you lose your license, what happens?" He smiled faintly. "I'll find another way to help people. I always have." "No," she whispered. "I won't let them take you down for saving my life." The next morning, Dana Wright published another piece, this time, from Rose's perspective. It was a deeply personal essay titled, "I Was Comatose, But Not Gone." In it, Rose spoke of the fear of being trapped in silence, the flickers of awareness, and the man who never stopped believing she was still there. "He didn't touch me like a body. He spoke to me like I was a person. And that might have saved my life." The article went viral, and something changed. The public began shifting their focus not just toward outrage at the Langfords, but toward gratitude for Victor. He received thousands of letters, emails, and messages from families who had felt helpless in similar situations. A mother in Wisconsin wrote, "You gave me hope for my son, who's been unresponsive for 4 years." A former ICU nurse shared, "I always knew we gave up too soon on some, but no one ever listened until now." But not everyone was grateful. That afternoon, Victor received a formal notice from the state medical board. He was being summoned to a disciplinary hearing the following Thursday. He read the words slowly, then folded the letter, placed it on his desk, and went back to checking Rose's vitals. At some point, she noticed his silence. "Bad news?" He nodded. "They want to make an example out of me." "Then we give them a story they can't bury," she said. The day of the hearing arrived under a gray New York sky. Victor walked into the grand old courthouse, flanked by Patricia and Kamiliich, of them dressed modestly but resolutely. The room was filled with observers, legal advisors, and a half-dozen board members whose expressions ranged from bored to hostile. Victor took his seat. The proceedings began with formalities, then allegations were read alodich more absurd than the last. He sat still, composed, until finally, the chair turned to him. "Dr. Reynolds, do you have a statement?" He stood, cleared his throat. "I've been called many things this past month. Reckless, arrogant, unethical. But not once has anyone asked me why I stayed by her side, why I broke protocol, why I chose to speak when I was told to stay silent. So let me answer that now. And," he paused, locking eyes with each board member in turn, "because I listened, not to the monitors or the policies or the paperwork. I listened to her breath, her heartbeat, her will to live. And when I saw the signs, the twitch, the tears, the voice that tried to rise, I chose to believe. Not because it was safe, but because it was right." A hush fell over the room. Then the doors opened. Rose entered. Leaning on a cane, her steps slow but deliberate, she made her way toward the front. "I would like to speak," she said, her voice stronger than anyone expected. The board hesitated, then nodded. She turned to them, calm and clear. "Dr. Reynolds didn't manipulate me. He protected me. When my own family tried to silence me, he listened. When everyone else turned away, he stayed. He is the reason I'm alive. And if this board punishes him for saving my life, then you're not protecting medicine, you're protecting power." Murmurs spread across the chamber. The chair conferred with his colleagues, then cleared his throat. "The board will recess to deliberate." An hour later, they returned. "Dr. Reynolds," the chair announced, "this board does not find sufficient cause to revoke your license. You are reinstated with immediate effect. This hearing is closed." Applause erupted, quiet at first, then rising. Rose leaned over to Victor. "They heard us," she whispered. "For once, they really heard us." He nodded, blinking back the tears. "Let's make sure they don't forget." That night, back at the clinic, Victor and Rose sat outside in the small courtyard, watching the first stars appear. She handed him a small folded paper. He opened it, a sketch she'd drawn, simple but elegant, 2 candles, one flickering, the other newly lit. Beneath it, she had written, "Light survives when it's shared." He looked up at her. "You're stronger than you know," she smiled. "So are you, but together, we're unstoppable." And in that quiet moment, with winter air curling around them and the city's chaos fading into a hush, they realized this was not the end of a story, it was only the breath before the next beginning. Spring light filtered through the clinic's windows as Rose and Victor sat across from each other in the small counseling room where every conversation since her awakening had been a revelation. It was 2 weeks after the hearing, and the headlines had quieted, but the scars remained. Rose curled her fingers around a half-drunk mug of herbal tea. "How are you, really?" she asked quietly. Victor took a slow sip from his own cup, then set it down. "Better," he murmured. "But I'm still fighting. The DA's office has launched a broader investigation into the hospital and the Langford Trust. I'll be testifying next week." Rose nodded. "You again? They can't ignore you now," Victor winced. "Maybe. But the truth is bigger than anyone hearing." "Is 5. Rose leaned forward, voice soft but firm. "We need to start rebuilding. The clinic is safe, but we need more than this corner." Victor looked at the neatly stacked folders between them, patient testimonies, legal briefs, media coverage. "I'm working on launching a foundation," he said, "to protect patients caught in the crossfire of wealth and power. But I need your voice." She nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'll do it." End part. The following day, Victor arranged a meeting with representatives from a major philanthropic foundation interested in healthcare equity. Rose sat beside him as he presented their proposal, a nonprofit dedicated to advocating for comatose and incapacitated patients, offering legal, medical, and psychological support to ensure their rights are protected. When Rose spoke, her voice echoed with purpose. "I almost lost my life because no one chose to listen," she said. "This foundation will ensure others aren't silenced when they still have a voice." The room was silent for a moment, then everyone nodded. A grant was offered within the hour. That afternoon, Victor walked home with a newfound lightness. He paused beneath a row of blossoming cherry trees, the petals drifting like confetti in the breeze. His phone buzzed notification. Langford Trust Assets frozen pending criminal investigation. He smiled to himself, safe on the street, away from courtrooms and headlines. But he knew the work had just begun. That night, he sat with Rose in the clinic courtyard again. The air now held faint warmth, and a single candle flickered between them on the table. Rose brushed a candle draft with her hand. "We made something real," she whispered. "Not just for us, but for everyone." He reached for her hand, firm and steady, "which means now we protect it." In 7 days later, a package arrived for Rose. Inside was a framed photograph from her childhood. Her and her younger brother, David Jr., smiling on a beach. Only then did Rose admit she had one memory from before the accident of being with him, but little else. "I blocked most of it out," she said. "Painful memories and guilt." Victor listened without interrupting. She continued. "I don't know who I am anymore, not really." He squeezed her hand. "We'll rediscover together." Inspired, Victor invited Rose to visit the community center he volunteered at in the Bronx. It was early morning when they arrived, greeted by children's laughter and chatter. Victor introduced her to staff and kids, showing her the free screening program they'd established. Rose watched as a small boy greeted her shyly with, "My mom's in a coma, but my dad talks to her every night." Rose's eyes softened. "Victor, we need to do more." He nodded. "That's why we build bridges, between patients and families, between silence and hope." Later, as they walked back in twilight, Rose stumbled slightly. Without hesitation, Victor caught her. "You okay?" he asked. She looked at him, vulnerable, fast returning. "Just remembering what it's like to rely on someone." He squeezed her hand. "You don't have to remember alone." "Hey." That evening, Victor received a call from the DA's office requesting him at City Hall to discuss charges that might be filed against David Langford and others. He informed Rose, who placed her hand over his. "We finished this," she said simply. He nodded, voice tight. Together, on the day of the meeting, Victor and Patricia entered City Hall's cold marble corridors. Rose was seated next to them, looking calmer than any courthouse allowed. An assistant led them into a hearing room filled with prosecutors and investigators. They reviewed evidence for 2 hours bank transfers, medical records, emails revealing instructions to silence staff. Rose provided voice confirmation and her recollection of overheard conversations. Victor's presentation of medical logs and surveillance clips tied it all together. When it was over, Rose's voice whispered, "Thank you for believing I wasn't gone." Victor looked at her, pride and emotion shining in his eyes. A few hours later, they left City Hall as the spring sun warmed their shoulders. Charges were announced quietly later that day. David Langford was indicted for elder abuse, conspiracy, medical negligence. The hospital administration faced civil penalties. Rose turned to Victor. "They heard us." He hugged her. "They will. Now we make sure they keep hearing." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity-speaking engagements, foundation planning sessions, interviews. At times, Victor felt overstretched, but Rose was his anchor, reminding him of why they fought. One evening, after a long seminar, they returned to the clinic courtyard, both exhausted. She handed him a small notebook. Inside were sketches and notes for the foundation's name, Whisper of Justice. "It speaks to what we started," she said. Victor nodded, something soft blooming in his chest like dawn. He closed the notebook, looked at her. "You know, when I saw you twitch that first night, I felt like I'd found someone who refused to stay quiet whatever the cost." She met his gaze. "Then we're just getting started." And beneath the rustling leaves and fading candlelight, They imagined the bridges they would build and the lives they would save in the years ahead. The city had shifted. Newsstands blared headlines. Langford Foundation shaken. Dr. Victor Reynolds vindicated. Whisper of justice launches. On this crisp spring morning, Victor walked with Rose to a modest downtown venue for the Foundation's inaugural public event. Their steps echoed in the marble foyer. The space was packed journalists, legal advocates, medical professionals, and families who owed him something deeper than gratitude. Kids with framed drawings of hospital beds and hearts. Survivors wearing unheard pins. Victor adjusted his tie, looking at Rose, whose confident smile seemed to light the room more than the spotlights. "Ready?" he asked softly. She squeezed his hand. "Let's start a revolution." Their speeches began simply. Victor spoke of silence in medicine, the unseen patients labeled lost causes. He shared Rose's journey not as victim, but as witness and warrior. Rose followed, her voice steady and clear. "When I was trapped," she said, "I learned the difference between being alive and truly living. I heard injustice, I heard greed, and I heard kindness. Victor's kindness saved me. Now, our foundation will be that kindness for everyone else." The audience rose in applause. Victor felt emotions swell, fragile but fierce. Afterward, in the wings, a recorder captured this exchange. A young woman, mother of a comatose patient, approached with tears. "You gave me hope," she said, pressing a letter into his hand. That night, he found her words inside. "Thank you for seeing my son when we couldn't." A lump rose in his throat. It was never about fame. It was about sight. They left under a canopy of applause and cameras, stepping into dusk. The breath of the city felt softer now. Victor scanned his phone emails from the DA's office confirming progress, letters from supporters, invitations to speak at conferences. But an alert stood out. Weston Medical Center had filed an appeal against the board's decision to reinstate him, citing procedural violations. He showed it to Rose, her jaw clenched. "They're not giving up," he nodded. "Neither are we." The next morning, Victor returned to the community center in the Bronx, this time not as a volunteer, but as an honored guest delivering a keynote. Rows of people filled folding chairs. Some wore white coats, some held babies, some clutched tablets displaying the foundation's name. They listened, riveted, while Victor spoke of equity, respect, the need to standardize protocols for coma patients. He ended with Rose's quote, "Every silent breath deserves to be heard." Questions poured in. People from insurance companies, hospital admin, city council. Victor answered with calm authority. The foundation had begun to erect bridges not just with families, but with systems. That afternoon, Victor walked to his favorite bench in Central Park to reflect. A newspaper lay open beside him, proclaiming, "Langford Heir Speaks, City Mourns Scandal." He watched commuters pass. He thought of his grandmother's words. Listen close. He had done more than that. He had amplified a voice society tried to still. But the foundation faced opposition. He knew legal battles waited. Later that week, a major donor called a philanthropist with ties to corporate healthcare. He praised their work but warned of backlash. They'll try to discredit the foundation by attacking Rose's claim she's fragile, unstable, unfit for public life. Victor thanked him, but felt tension climb. He shared the message with Rose over dinner in her apartment's cozy kitchen. She stirred her tea slowly. "Let them try. I'm not afraid," she declared. He reached out. "Your voice is stronger than their doubt." She looked at him, warmth in her eyes. "And I'm not alone." At bedtime, Victor called Camille. Together, they planned their next initiative. A national hotline for patients in persistent vegetative states, a registry to monitor hospital decisions, a volunteer mediator to advocate for families. Camille's voice was hopeful. "We're building more than a foundation," she said. "We're building a movement." Victor smiled. One whisper at a time. The following evening, Rose joined Victor at the clinic courtyard. Under the glow of a single lamp, they reviewed plans, drew timelines, sketched logos. City sounds hummed around them. The foundation was growing, but so was the resistance. Victor paused. "They filed a lawsuit demanding we remove Layla's story," he said, referring to the mother they'd featured. Rose's brows raised. "On what grounds?" "Privacy infringement," he said. "Irony is their father's lawyer drafted that suit." Rose sighed, then gripped his hand. Then we defend it. Public record. Right thing to do. Victor nodded, resolve hardening. Tomorrow, we meet our legal team. That night, he dreamed of hospital corridors shrouded in darkness. He walked alone until he found Rose's bed. She lay still, chest rising and falling. He whispered her name. She opened her eyes. "Listen," she said. And in that moment, he woke, eyes brimming with tears, heart pounding. It was a reminder. The battles would come again, but so would the voices. The next morning, they arrived at the law office together, two quiet fighters in a sleek conference room. Lawyers outlined strategy. Rose spoke clearly. Consent was given. Our story empowers. We refuse to be silenced again. The lawyers nodded. They would counter-sue for defamation. They would protect every voice that needed to be heard. Leaving the office, Victor and Rose stepped into sunshine. The world felt peach-infused and full of possibility. A single cherry blossom drifted across Rose's path. She caught it. "A new bloom," she whispered. Victor smiled. "A new beginning." She looked at him with gratitude and something deeper, unspoken but powerful. "We're changing the world," she said. "Yes," he agreed, one whisper at a time. The morning sun glinted off the courthouse steps as Victor and Rose stepped into the brisk, early air, their footsteps echoing amid a sea of reporters and camera lenses. Today was the defamation hearing brought by Weston Medical Center, demanding the removal of patient stories like Layla's and threatening the foundation's credibility. Victor gripped Rose's hand as they entered the marble foyer, on unspoken promise that they would face this together. Inside, the courtroom was silent but heavy with tension, the kind that creaks in old buildings when everyone knows history might be written inside. Legal teams took their seats, the judge entered, and proceedings began. Weston's attorney rose first, voice polished. "Your Honor, the Whisper of Justice Foundation has published personal medical information without proper consent. They have defamed Weston by insinuating institutional negligence. We request immediate injunction and damages." Rose shifted beside Victor but kept her expression steady. Victor felt a familiar rush. This was more than a trial. It was a test of every principle they'd fought for. When it was their turn, Victor stood first. He addressed the court directly. "We stand here not to slander a hospital, but to honor the dignity of patients. Each story we share is public record with consent given by families. In Layla's case, her mother signed the consent form. She's in the courtroom." On cue, a woman rose at the back, a petite figure with determined eyes. Victor continued. "The Foundation's mission is not sensationalism. It is accountability and hope. To silence us is to silence vulnerable voices." Next, Rose rose to speak. The courtroom hushed as she walked to the stand. Dressed simply, with a quiet confidence, she faced the judge. "I confronted a family conspiracy to end my life quietly because of money. I would still be dead if Victor hadn't listened to my flickers, my tears, even my voice. I'm here because I was brave enough to speak when others wouldn't." She paused. "If consent means being silenced beyond my voice, then I refuse it. A patient's story is not theirs. Alone it belongs to humanity." Cameras clicked, murmurs spread. Victor's throat tightened with pride. She was lighting fires with her words. Their lawyer presented consent forms, signed affidavits from Layla and other families, and transcripts. The judge reviewed everything, expression neutral. Over the prosecutor's objections, the judge asked Rose, "Do you understand the implications of sharing your medical narrative publicly?" Rose nodded. "I do. I want it to be heard. I want other families to know they are not alone." Outside the courtroom windows, cherry blossoms nestled along the square, delicate symbols of new beginnings. After lunch, the defense tried to undermine their intentions. They claimed Victor had an agenda, and Rose was influenced by controversy. Their tone grew clinical, attempting to reduce Rose to an unstable patient. Victor felt anger spike but suppressed it. Rose was strong. That much was clear. Then Victor requested to play a short clip, Layla's mother speaking about how sharing her daughter's progress encouraged a hospital to allow continued care. The video showed tears, gratitude, hope restored. The courtroom hushed again. The judge's eyebrows rose. The defense looked unsettled. By mid-afternoon, closing arguments began. Victor's lawyer spoke of medical ethics, autonomy, and public good. Weston's counsel focused on privacy, reputation, liability. When Victor again rose, he touched Rose's hand and delivered his words softly but clearly. This isn't a question of legal technicalities. It's about whether society values transparency over image, whether we choose to listen to voices the system deems inconvenient. I once believed a slight eyelid twitch. It changed everything. Today, I believe in every person's right to be heard of in silence. He sat. Rose returned to her seat. The judge paused before delivering the verdict. The courtroom held its breath. After careful review, he began, voice calm. This court finds that the Foundation obtained proper consent in all featured cases. No defamation has occurred. The injunction is denied. Weston Medical Center is admonished for any undue attempt to gag them. Court is adjourned. Silence broke into applause. Victor and Rose embraced briefly before stepping forward to answer questions from journalists. Their words were measured, hopeful. They spoke of accountability, transparency, patient empowerment. That evening, back in the clinic courtyard, Victor and Rose sat under the same single lamp they'd shared through so many nights. The city lights flickered beyond. She handed him a small envelope. Inside, a newspaper clipping announcing the verdict, framed with a quote, "Integrity beats image, always." He smiled, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We did it," she whispered. They heard. He nodded, voice soft. More than heard, they listened. Then he added quietly, "And now, they'll never look away." In the days that followed, the Foundation's hotline lit up. Families, lawyers, hospitals requested protocols. Legislators invited Rose and Victor to speak at panels. Even Weston Medical announced an internal ethics review news that made headlines as a sign of systemic change. But change demanded vigilance. As Victor updated the Foundation's board, including Camille, Patricia, Layla's mother, and Rose, he reminded them, this is only the beginning. That night, Victor returned to his modest apartment. On his desk lay the first copy of their Foundation's handbook, Listening is Medicine. He opened to the dedication, "For every whisper that could have been a heartbeat." His phone buzzed a late message from Rose. "Let's build the bridge tomorrow." He typed, "Always." And beneath the dim lamp, with shadows receding in the new dawn, he realized that today they had not only survived a trial, they had created a pathway forward. The morning was crisp and bright, an unexpected gift after days of rain. Victor arrived early at the National Neurology Conference Center, where he and Rose were scheduled to deliver a keynote address. The lobby buzzed with scientists, doctors, policymakers. Banners proclaimed, "Advancing patient advocacy, voices beyond the vitals." As he adjusted his microphone pack, Rose slipped beside him, calm and composed. "They're waiting for us," she murmured. He nodded, his heart steady but full. "Let's remind them why we're here." The room filled within minutes. When they stepped onto the stage, applause greeted them like warm applause. Victor began with measured pauses, recounting the journey, the flicker of Rose's eyelid, the viral article, the courtroom battles. He spoke of ethical duty and institutional accountability with surgical clarity. Then, just as Rose took the podium, the lights dimmed behind her, and a single spotlight highlighted her. "I was silent for months," she said softly. "Not because I was gone, but because I didn't have a chance to speak." Victor gave that chance. The room exhaled. She tugged at the mic stand. "Today, I reclaim that silence as my own voice, and I give it to all who couldn't." Her speech ended with a question projected across the stage. If a patient can't speak, who speaks for them? Silence followed, then roaring applause. As they left the stage, Victor felt more than relief. He felt resolve. Their foundation had just found its heartbeat. Over the next hour, they met with medical leaders, journalists, and legislators drafting new patient consent laws. One senator approached Victor with a firm handshake. "We're working on a bill mandating audio recording of end-of-life discussions. Can I call on you to testify in committee?" Victor nodded. "Of course," Rose added. "And I'll join you. Witnessing is believing." As the conference ended, they retreated to the quiet of the hotel garden. Rose traced soft circles on the tabletop. "This is new territory," she said. "Policy, law, public responsibility." Victor nodded. "We're building bridges between bedside and statute." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Promise me something?" He waited. "Promise me we won't lose what got us here." He smiled. Our whisper will always lead the way. That afternoon, a live television debate featured Victor, Rose, a hospital administrator representing Weston Medical, and a legal ethicist. The administrator argued that publicizing coma cases could violate privacy and cause distrust. Victor countered, "Trust shouldn't be built on silence. It should be built on transparency and respect. Patients deserve to be heard even when they cannot speak." Rose added, "Privacy is vital, but consent empowers. Silence without choice is no protection." Viewers responded with thousands of tweets, many quoting Rose's phrase, "Consent empowers." Ode. Backstage, Victor's phone buzzed repeatedly. Invitations to speak at medical schools, requests from families seeking help, offers of partnerships. They had become a movement. Later that evening, they returned to the clinic courtyard where it all began. Under the glow of that single lamp, they sat quietly. Though the world had expanded around them, the candle remained the same. Rose rested her head on Victor's shoulder. He said softly, "We made noise." She shook her head gently. "We made change." Weeks later, they traveled to Washington. On the steps of Capitol Hill, they posed for photographs, briefing staffers on the Patient Voice Act, the proposed legislation they helped author. Victor answered reporters' questions while Rose stood, calm and confident. Her presence spoke voluminous truth embodied. In the days that followed, hearings were held. Victor testified on patient autonomy. Rose shared her bedroom statements from the coma, her taped confession. Their combined testimony made history, challenged conventions, and reshaped public dialogue. Lawmakers took notes. Advocates felt energized. The act passed its first committee unanimously. They released statements that night, consensus forming to mandate clearer protocols for incapacitated patients nationwide. Returning to New York, Victor and Rose found the foundation's office buzzing. Camille had organized volunteer teams. Patricia finalized partnerships. Their hotline received record calls. Layla's mother hugged them both, tears of relief shining in her eyes. "You changed my life," she whispered to Victor. He shook his head. "No, I just listened." That night, back at Rose's apartment, they toasted with chamomile tea. Rose held up her glass. "To justice whispered," she said. Victor echoed, "To every silent breath given a voice." They clinked mugs softly. Then Rose laughed a gentle sound, full of healing. "Remember when silence scared us?" She smiled at him. "Now silence is our ally." Victor wrapped an arm around her. The world had shifted. Hospitals would never be the same. Laws would evolve. Countless lives would carry their message forward. But beyond the headlines, beyond the acclaim, they had discovered something deeper. Whispered justice endures when we choose to protect it. Under that lamp, in the hush of the courtyard, Victor realized those two flicker-san eyelid and a finger had started a revolution. Not with thunder or storms, but with the courage to listen. And as long as they kept listening, justice would always whisper back. Early summer sunlight streamed into the foundation's newly renovated office, a modest space in a community building, yet pulsing with purpose. Victor stepped inside carrying 2 coffees, balancing them as he approached the long table where Rose, Camille, Patricia, and a few volunteers reviewed documents. Children's drawings taped to the walls chronicled stories of comatose loved ones. He placed the coffees down. "Fuel for the revolution," he joked softly. Rose smiled appreciatively. "Thank you." They took seats and dove into plans, launching mobile response units to advocate for hospitalized patients, prepping educational materials for law schools, organizing regional workshops for families and ethics committees, and planning a national conference to coincide with Patient Voice Act passage. Camille handed Victor a folder with months-old photos of hospital corridors. She'd uncovered more incidents. Patients declared brain dead, transferred to hospice under family pressure, without proper consent. These stories became case studies for their training. "Each one," she said quietly, "was a voice that didn't get heard until now." Victor closed the folder gently, determined. By midday, they paused for lunch at a nearby cafe, a thin reprieve amid whirlwind work. Their conversation turned personal. Rose leaned back with gazed. "I've been thinking about returning to Langford Holdings," she said. The table paused. Victor gently set his fork down. "Tell us more," Rose inhaled. "I've inherited a seat on the board. I want to change things from the inside. corporate medical policies, funding for care, equity, I can influence. Patricia nodded slowly. It's a bold move, Camille smiled. It could amplify our reach. Victor reached across and squeezed her hand. I've always said rebuild bridges. This is a major one. Rose met his gaze, gratitude, and resolve shining. Let's do it together. That afternoon, Victor prepared for his second televised interview in a month. The host asked about Rose's return to the corporate world. He answered honestly. Healing broken systems requires both external pressure and internal commitment. Rose's voice belongs at every table, especially the ones she once didn't sit at. Meanwhile, Rose met with her board mentor, an elderly member with a reputation for reform. He asked her about her goals. She responded clearly. Implement patient-centered care policies, mandate recorded consent for comatose patients, tie executive compensation to transparency metrics. He nodded approvingly. You shake the table. She smiled. That's the plan. Back at the foundation office, volunteers prepped care packages for families facing ICU decisions, informative booklets, contact lines, emotional support guides. The hotline was now receiving daily calls. Camille updated the group. We have enough interest to formalize regional chapters within 6 months. Everyone shared quiet excitement, transformation in motion. That evening, Victor walked Rose home. They paused under a linden tree near her apartment. He looked at her. It's been 1 year since the accident. She nodded. The twinkling tree lights reflected in her eyes. She took his hand. We saved lives and changed law. But I want my family's legacy to be about compassion, not control. Victor hugged her. And we're making that happen. At Rose's door, Camille called. She needed advice, another family reluctant to speak up. Victor stepped back before entering. Keep whispering, he told Rose. She smiled. Always. He went down the stoop while she watched him walk away, feelings deep in her eyes. Days later, Victor and Rose prepared for a foundation summit, invited speakers from multiple states, patients, advocates, lawmakers. They rehearsed opening remarks together. We're not just rewriting law, Victor said. We're rewriting trust. Rose nodded. Trust is the cornerstone of healing. The summit day arrived. A regional executive from a major health system took the stage first, announcing that they'd adopted recording protocols in all their hospitals. Applause rippled across the auditorium. Victor and Rose followed. She began. When I couldn't speak, I still held a voice. It belonged to someone who believed. Victor continued. Our stories are proof that listening saves lives and listening is a human right. The rest of the day unfolded in stories. Parents who reclaimed their child's life, nurses who found purpose, doctors who reconnected. Victor watched, moved to tears by the hope in every testimony. Rose sat beside him, tears glistening. This was their legacy, unfolding before them. That evening, the team celebrated over modest takeout in the office. They toasted the summit's success. Camille raised her glass. To bridges built, voices heard. Victor answered, and to the next generation who will carry this forward. Rose looked around the room, her heart full. We began with a whisper. Tonight, we speak with purpose. As midnight approached, only Victor and Rose remained. They took a walk through the quiet streets, windows aglow in brownstones. The world felt different now, more listening, more alive. Rose paused and looked at Victor. I couldn't have done it without you. He smiled, taking in the moment. Wherever you go inside that company, on any platform, I'll be right there. They paused beneath an old oak tree. Rose leaned against him. His hand rested on her shoulder. In the rustle of leaves, there was promise and peace, proof that justice whispered could grow into something lasting. And as they stood together beneath the night sky, they knew their whisper had become a bridge, and now it would stand for generations. Morning sunlight warmed the courtyard where Victor and Rose enjoyed their quiet ritual. 2 steaming mugs on the small metal table where their journey began. It was a year to the day since Victor first heard Rose's eyelid twitch in the ICU. In that moment, neither could have imagined the ripple that would reshape hospitals, laws, corporations. Now, they sat side by side, his hand over hers, their gazes reflecting shared pride. Rose wrapped her scarf tighter around her shoulders and smiled. We did it, she breathed. He nodded. And we're just beginning. Their foundation office buzzed behind them. Windows open to sunlight and laughter. Volunteers finishing shipment jobs. Interns preparing week-long site visits. Families on the hotline receiving support. Victor took a restful sip of tea. "We went from 2 flickers to national movement," he said softly. Rose laughed, a gentle melody. All because someone chose to notice. End of shilling. They entered the building, greeted by Camille, her eyes shining. "Events are packed this week: the National Coalition meeting, the intern graduation, the televised panel," she said. "The momentum's unstoppable." Patricia emerged from her office, holding a freshly printed copy of the amended Patient Voice Act. "Congress passed it yesterday," she announced. Rose and Victor exchanged stunned looks. "We did it," Rose said again. Victor exhaled with emotion. "That's history." At noon, they joined a roundtable with lawmakers drafting implementation guidelines. Rose took the lead, her voice clear and calm. "Recording end of life and coma discussions ensures patients aren't subject to decisions made in private, without oversight." She handed copies of their foundation's policy framework, developed from real cases they had championed. Victor added, "This is about meting out dignity, not just care. We must monitor compliance, audit hospitals, train providers, give families tools so that no one slips through silence again." Later, they toured the new Patient Advocacy Center launched by the Foundation. Counseling rooms, digital kiosks, explaining rights, a video studio for patient testimonies, and the mobile response van they funded for urgent ICU visits. A young volunteer named Maria, whose father had survived a coma, introduced herself. "You saved him," she said, voice trembling. Rose hugged her as Victor watched proudly. That single phrase, "you saved him," was more powerful than any headline. Back at the summit stage in late afternoon, Victor and Rose made final remarks. Rose spoke of hope. Victor spoke of responsibility. They ended with their shared refrain, "Every silent breath deserves to be heard." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Victor felt heat press in his chestnut exhaustion, but the weight of everything they had accomplished and the promise of what was to come. That evening, in Rose's apartment, they celebrated quietly with chamomile and honey. She held up the reprinted policy copy, signed into law by President Asterisk. Victor slurped his tea and joked, "We'll need to get a real press pass now." She placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. "We earned it." They spoke of the future, provincial chapters of the Foundation, partnerships with universities to train next-gen advocates, plans for a patient rights clinic in underserved communities. Victor paused. "Remember when all I had was a stethoscope and a whisper?" He looked at her. "Now we have infrastructure, law, legacy." Rose smiled, that warmth returning to her eyes. "And a partnership built on listening." The next morning, they attended the first official coalition meeting at the Department of Health, joining hospital representatives now required to implement recording protocols. Victor watched as administrators, lawyers, and caregivers clustered around Rose, asking questions. She answered each with clarity. Victor felt a deep pride not in himself, but in what they had built together. That afternoon, they returned to the community center in the Bronx. Children greeted Victor as Captain Reynolds, hugging him excitedly. Rose crouched to their level, high-fiving them. The place was transformed, a dedicated wing named the Whisper Room, with audio-activated lighting and posters celebrating patients' voices. A plaque read, "This room is for every story that needed to be heard." Victor read it aloud, voice-catching. He turned to Rose, tears in his eyes. She hugged him, strong and steady. We kept listening. At dusk, they wandered through the courtyard again. Outside noise softened into lullaby evening ambiance. Rose reached for Victor's hand. "Do you think we made a difference?" she asked. He squeezed her fingers. "Not think I know." He gestured to the lit-up faces behind the windows. "All these lives, stories, families, they matter because we didn't look away." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then let's never stop." End quote. They stood quietly as the streetlights flickered on, the candle they lit each evening now just for kindness. Beneath the lamp, Victor glanced at Rose. Together, Rose nodded. Always. Their shadows stretched behind them, joined. They had turned whispers into law, doubt into trust, invisibility into legacy, and so their story closed not with an end, but a horizon. A world where silent souls would no longer go unheard, because two people once listened and found courage enough to make the world listen too.